Dodge this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Popeye from Down the Rabbit Hole, PopeyeRadio.com, and FederalJack.com. Putting this video together really quick just to show you something. I want to bring up a very important topic. The drought that's going on in California. This ongoing drought that's been going on in California since 2011. And I am going to show you in the following video how that drought is being manipulated on purpose through geoengineering, through weather modification. Now, there are multiple reasons and outcomes for doing things like this. There's never just one reason, and I will go over the multiple reasons during the video, and I will show you pieces of evidence from myself and other researchers backing up my synopsis. So first, let's get into the drought that California is going through. Now, I'm sure you have all heard the latest news. It's March 15th, 2015 currently, and I'm sure you've all heard the latest news that a NASA scientist came out recently the other day in Newsweek and said that there is not enough water in California to last more than a year, and there's going to be strict rationing. And a lot of people could initially say, oh, well, this is just people fear-mongering, but this is actually being picked up by the mainstream media, and this has been an ongoing problem and been something that's been warned about for a while because of this drought. And one of the major problems is the people on the ground, the politicians, the people in charge, the bureaucrats, they have not prepared for such an event. They have not prepared their people. They have not prepared the citizens of California for such an event, and they have not urged the people of California to prepare for such an event over the past couple of years. And it doesn't matter if they start preparing tomorrow, there will be more problems than there would have been if they had started to prepare last year or the year before. So they're going to have to come up with some more solutions, and they're going to have to do so much faster. Now, there's plenty of things you can get into, like the huge desalination plant that they're building over there, which I've been saying for years that they should be building desalination plants all over the world instead of spending money on bombs, rockets, and missiles that chase people down corridors and around hallways. And instead of building laser weapons and more stuff to kill people with, perhaps the money should be spent by these governments around the world to build desalination plants all along the coasts. Even if you had to put them inland to protect them from tsunamis or earthquakes, you could still build these plants and provide clear, fresh drinking water to many people around the world that actually need it, and that would solve many problems. Anyway, getting back to the drought in California. Now, they are, by the way, building this huge desalination plant out in Cali currently, and hopefully that will help alleviate some of the problem, but still, the major portion of the problem is it has not rained. They have not had a lot of rain, and if you don't have enough rain to replenish the reservoirs and the rivers and everything else, well, you're going to have a drought. Now, I know they get some of the water from Southern California, gets some of the water from the Colorado River, but that still doesn't help the center part of the state, nor does it help the northern part of the state, and even the Colorado River is only good for a certain percentage of water. You still need the other water from the northern half to flow down through the state. So let's get into the evidence to support my hypothesis, and not just mine, but others, that the drought in California is being done on purpose via weather modification, otherwise known as geoengineering, which is very real. And you can go look up, they've actually had conferences where these people, these scientists, these geoengineers actually admit that they are actually doing what we are saying that they're doing. This is not just some mythical thing that we're making up. We're not just conspiracy theorists. We're conspirators! First, I'm going to play a clip from CBS News, which anybody with half a brain knows should be called the CIA. literally CBS crawling with CIA, but that's a complete another separate side issue. Anyway, I'm going to play a clip from CBS News that they recently released about 2 weeks ago. They came out with, and it's titled right on their website, which I should take a screenshot of, "Ridiculously Resilient Ridge Responsible for California Drought." So they're blaming this ridiculously resilient, as these scientists are saying, high pressure ridge that's blocking moisture from coming in. Where have I seen that before? Oh, that's right. It's happened before in history where a high pressure ridge stopped moisture from coming in and caused a drought in California. And back then it was surmised that it was done by man. People blamed the Russians, but think if it was done by the Russians and the current psychos in power figured that out, and they figured out how to manipulate the weather the same way the Russians did. And that now they're doing with our own current weather weaponry. Remember, there's actually a UN treaty that goes back to the 70s that states that they can't use weather weapons on each other, but they can use weather weapons inside their own countries on their own people. They're allowed to test them and use them. So who's to say that they're not purposely causing this drought in California? And as I said, there are multiple implications as to why they would do that, and we will get into that. But first, let me show you this clip from CBS where they admit that this high-pressure ridge is stopping the moisture from coming in and getting to California as it should. And then I will present the evidence that that high-pressure ridge is man-made and that man can manipulate the weather, and that it is completely possible. And maybe, just maybe, people will take the issue of geoengineering more seriously, especially if they realize that massive drought, that massive catastrophe waiting to happen in California, that's actually already happening, it's a slow motion catastrophe, is being done on purpose and being done by man. Not by Mother Nature, but by mankind's manipulation of Mother Nature. So here we go. First, the CBS clip.
The flip side to all of this is record warmth in the West. Mid-50s in parts of Alaska this week, and it is dry there. 93% of California is in a severe drought. Here's Ben Tracy.
This time-lapse video shows the mountaintops of Squaw Valley, California. There's so little snow, next month's World Cup ski event had to be canceled. Nevada's Lake Mead Reservoir, which provides water for 20 million people, is less than half full. And in Oregon, the snowpack on Mount Hood is so low, farmer John Laraway fears water rationing come spring.
Growers may have to go on a schedule basis where they can't irrigate as much. We've never had to do that on this side of the valley.
Scientists blame what they call a ridiculously resilient ridge of high pressure off the coast of California. It's been blocking winter storms and keeping temperatures above normal. Eric Bolt is a government meteorologist.
I think it's unprecedented because we are seeing the warmest temperatures we've seen on record. Often that high pressure will start to shift back to the west and we start to see colder storm systems moving through our region, but that just doesn't happen the last 2 years.
Northern California did get several inches of rain earlier this month, but mountain snow is what matters most. The spring snowmelt provides a third of California's water, helping fill the state's nearly empty reservoirs. The latest snow survey found the Sierra snowpack at just 12% of normal.
Government scientists are now predicting a 4th straight year of drought out here in the West, and it's even dry in Hawaii. 50% of that state is now in a drought. But Scott, I can't imagine anyone out east is feeling too bad for us tonight.
Ben Tracy in Los Angeles. Ben, thanks very much.
Nikola Tesla was an eccentric genius and was widely seen as the great rival to Thomas Edison.
Around 1891, Tesla invented the type of towering transformer coils still in use today to generate high voltage currents for studying electricity. It was Tesla who developed alternating current the electrical current that we use to power our homes and appliances. It was also Tesla who put man on his quest to control the weather. He developed a chilling theory for controlling the weather using extremely low-frequency waves, or ELF waves. If you've been to a rock concert and felt the low-frequency vibrations of the music pounding from the speakers, ELF waves are similar to that. ELF waves are low-level electrical currents that are discarded from electrical power lines, electrical wirings in our homes, even electrical equipment in our cars. These are normally emitted at levels so low that they won't harm you. Tesla theorized that if ELF waves could be beamed into the ionosphere, in the upper reaches of the atmosphere, man could change the course of weather. The ELF waves would create heat, altering the molecular structure of the ionosphere, pushing it out into space.
When you heat a certain region of the ionosphere, it literally pushes it up and creates what would look like a column of space, and the lower atmosphere then rushes in to fill that space, and as it does, it changes the flow of jet streams within the region, pressure systems, and in that respect, it could manipulate weather.
What this means is the heated ionosphere acts like a giant dam, rerouting the path of the jet stream. The jet stream flows between 6 and 9 miles above the Earth's surface and reaches speeds up to 300 miles per hour.
The jet stream is a focused, high-velocity rope of air that moves billions of gallons of water around our world, like a giant river at 50, 60,000 feet up. It moves all the water around our world for rain, for storms. This is the lifeblood of planet Earth.
Could Tesla's theories help create a new generation of covert weather weapons?
It was the Russians that were creating this signal.
Perhaps it's already here. Has the United States already been attacked by a weather weapon? July 1976. Strange, unexplained blackouts in worldwide communications plagued the globe. Ham radio operators all over the U.S. are picking up seemingly random, unknown radio signals. It's causing static interference with radio, television, and even telephone transmissions all across North America.
This signal was a tapping that would go for like 10 beats and then stop for a bit, and 10 beats and stop for a bit.
U.S. scientists discover the cryptic signal is coming from the Soviet Union. They assign it an innocuous name.
It was called the Russian woodpecker because it was the Russians that were creating this signal, and the sound that the ham operators heard was essentially that sort of clicking, pecking sound.
Here is an actual tape recording of the mysterious signal. Satellite photos reveal the Russians have secretly constructed a gigantic radio transmitter and are covertly transmitting extremely low-frequency waves, otherwise known as ELF waves, into the atmosphere over North America. The Russians would continue beaming this signal until at least 1989, the last time they were detected. But why?
The way the woodpecker worked was that you had a very large radar that was pumping out millions and millions of watts of radio frequency energy. And that tick, 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 tick was each time a pulse was sent out. And in each one of those pulses, there was a tremendous amount of energy. What they were trying to do is to see our ballistic missiles coming up into space and on their way into the Soviet Union.
An over-the-horizon radar system meant to provide Russia with an early warning of U.S. missile launches is one possible explanation. But other researchers around the world now suspect something more sinister was at play.
At the times that the signal was coming through, there were some very bizarre things taking place.
In 1982, a report by Pentagon researcher El Ponte alleges the Russian woodpecker signal is actually creating layers of artificial ionization in the upper atmosphere, which means it could have been bending the jet stream and altering global wind patterns, just as Nikola Tesla had theorized nearly 100 years earlier.
There's been a lot of research in military labs over what you can do with putting radio waves into the atmosphere and changing the dynamics of the atmosphere. And some of the research indicates that one can move the jet stream around and thus induce weather conditions.
Was the woodpecker yet another Cold War weapon directed at the U.S.? Turns out while the woodpecker was in operation, something very strange began happening. From 1987 through 1992, California experienced the most severe drought in the state's history. Crops and livestock were dying. Food prices were escalating. People were terrified. Scientists were baffled.
Growing up in Northern California, I remember this drought very well. I remember just how scared everybody was because of how dry it was, how low the humidity was, and how easy the fires were started. It was scary.
Some researchers believe the cause of California's drought was a mysteriously stalled high-pressure system 800 miles off the state's coast, blocking the usual flow of moist Pacific air from coming ashore. An extremely unusual atmospheric anomaly. This is the jet stream in the early 1980s. High-altitude winds gently pushing moisture towards the southwestern coast of the United States. The arrows indicate winds blowing in an easterly direction. But according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, between the years of 1988 and 1992, during the California drought, an anomaly occurs in the jet stream. The winds appear to change direction, blowing east to west instead of west to east, indicating the jet stream coming into the west is suddenly much weaker than normal, causing a drought. By 1995, the jet stream returns to normal. The Soviets deny any involvement in weather warfare. Still, believers feel the denial is not surprising. In fact, it's expected.
One of the significant elements of weather warfare is the plausible deniability angle to it. You can't really attribute it to anyone at all because you don't know if it's just the weather or if it's some more sinister military application that you're being subjected to.
If you can trigger nature to do the work for you, you can raise covert wars, which our country and many others are famous for, and yet have the deniability that goes along with it.
Weather experts from NOAA and from the National Weather Service can't explain why the jet stream anomaly occurred. Perhaps it's all just a part of Mother Nature's unpredictable ebbs and flows. Still, it's no coincidence that the United States began building its own mysterious array of antennas in February 1992. They are located in Gakona, Alaska. The project is called HARP.
HARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, originally a joint effort of the Air Force and Navy in cooperation with a number of academic institutions.
It is today the world's largest radio broadcasting station, but it's not designed to broadcast for human ears. It uses a unique patented ability to focus the energy coming out of the antenna field and injects that energy into a spot at the very top of the atmosphere in a region called the ionosphere.
HARP is comprised of 180 antennas, approximately 72 feet tall, linked together to function as one giant steerable antenna. Steerable because it can aim millions of watts of ELF waves into one tiny patch of the atmosphere.
The amount of energy we're talking about here is 3.6 million watts. To give you an idea of what that is, the largest legal AM radio station in North America is 50,000 watts. HARP is 72,000 50,000 watt radio stations injecting their entire output into a spot that's about 12 miles across by about 2.5 miles deep by about 90 miles up.
This is where HARP is pointing. It's an area located roughly 300 miles from Anchorage. The U.S. military says HARP is merely being used to study the physical and electrical properties and behavior of the ionosphere for both civilian and defense purposes. But another theory is surfaced. The intense energy being beamed into the sky by HARP is actually heating up the atmosphere, causing weather changes.
HAARP is being used for weather modification. The military's own record proves it. They've admitted it within their own documents, and yet they still deny it to the public.
Dr. Brooks Agnew has researched ELF wave technology for the past 30 years and is convinced HAARP's effect on the ionosphere does alter the weather.
HAARP couldn't affect the jet stream directly, but indirectly it could, because if you push the ionosphere out into space, then the stratosphere just under the ionosphere has to move to fill in that gap. When it moves, it could pull the jet stream with it, thus rerouting it hundreds of miles, changing the way water moves through our atmosphere.
Dr. Agnew has devised a demonstration to show how HAARP could manipulate the atmosphere.
So what we've done is we've got a cloud generator up here. It's an ultrasonic nebulizer. It's going to create real water particles, just like you would find in a cloud. What we're seeing now is we're actually filling this chamber with microscopic water particles. You can see that it's almost completely filled with water vapor. It's beginning to condense a little bit on the sides, just so that you can see the detail. We've got a nice dense fog, just like you were sitting inside a cloud at 50,000 feet.
At the bottom of the cloud chamber, Dr. Agnew has constructed an ELF wave transmitter, a miniature version of HAARP.
We're only using 100 watts. It's perfectly safe.
When Dr. Agnew turns on the ELF wave transmitter and begins shooting ELF waves into the simulated cloud, the cloud begins to move up to the top of the chamber, taking the moisture with it.
If you get down low enough, you can actually see a clear layer above the antenna. It is actually pushing these water particles up, and that's exactly how HAARP works. What we've done is we've not only pushed the cloud off of the HAARP antenna, but as you can see, our cloud is almost completely gone inside. HAARP does exactly the same thing. It ionizes the particles, pushes them out into space.
HAARP is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe. The United States owns and operates 3 of them, one in Gacona, Alaska, another in Fairbanks, Alaska, and one in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Russia has one in Vasilursky near Nizhny Novgorod, and the European Union has one near Tromsø in Norway. Working in tandem, these transmitters could potentially alter the weather anywhere in the world, changing the jet stream's course entirely, triggering massive rainstorms or droughts. Even hurricane steering would be possible by heating up the atmosphere and building up high-pressure domes that could deflect or change the course of hurricanes. The U.S. government is firm in its position that HAARP is just an atmospheric research facility. But is it more than coincidence that since going online, some experts have reported strange weather anomalies, including massive floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes?
Hey guys, it's Melissa and Aaron.
Hey everybody.
And there's all this stuff going on right now with Ebola and midterm elections and blah, 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 blah. But honestly, none of that stuff really matters and all pales in comparison to some of the bigger things that are actually going on right now. And one of those big things is this continuing drought in California, which they're talking about metering private wells. It's gotten to the point now where these cities all along the coast are putting up tattletale apps for people so they can drought shame their neighbors. So you have people like this guy, drought shaming. Actually, this is a broken water main or something. That makes sense. But other people leaving their sprinklers on, they'll tweet out their address and try to get hate thrown their way. And this guy here actually makes videos of neighbors who leave sprinklers on at night and the water leaks down to the sidewalk. And in this video, he actually put the wrong address from what's in the video. But I mean, these people are going to get $500 a day fines, up to $500 a day for this kind of stuff. And none of these people who are drought shaming, I mean, maybe this one really angry guy here who is talking about the broken water main, which obviously they're there to take care of. But, I mean, nobody's standing outside of Nestle at their plant outside of Sacramento sucking 80 million gallons of water a year off of Sacramento to sell it, you know. No one's drought shaming all the CAFO lots. Beyond that, you have something else that's actually going on. And it's been documented by several people, one of which is the HARP report. He has done some really good work to show how this drought is engineered, how the weather is being manipulated. Something they've been able to do for decades now. People are still trying to argue that that's not happening. If you've ever seen the movie Chinatown,
there's lots of corruption and definitely money to be made from creating a drought, selling water to people in drought conditions, and furthermore, crop insurance and betting on the weather with weather derivatives has become a big secret market for those at the top.
and this guy here, the HARP report on YouTube, he has shown extensively how they are manipulating the weather off the coast of California to keep this drought going, and have been doing so for months and months now. And now it's this record-breaking drought, right? I'm just going to play a little clip of this video.
Okay, it's October 22nd, 2014, and there's a whole lot of hidden geoengineered aerosols going in west of California, and this is strictly to maintain the California and Nevada drought. There's this small postage stamp area of heavy chemtrail aerosols sprayed right at daybreak, and that's not the only area they were spraying. But these vertical bars here hung together all day today.
Can you see that?
And by evening are basically on the California coast. These ones here are designed to not only stop the storms in this area, but also to hold this powerful jet stream flat, because these clouds are trying to coil up into a low pressure and then move into California. These aerosols here and here are designed to maintain this high pressure.
And that's just one example of one video that he did. But he's actually done a whole series, as you can see over here, multiple videos. I think there are 6 parts on how they used HARP on an island off of Baja to kill Hurricane Norbert. He mentions multiple times in here that it's this Isla Guadalupe, I'm probably saying it wrong, off of the coast of Baja. It's the HARP transmitter on that island. And then somebody from Metabunk came and tried to argue that there is no HARP transmitter on this small island. Somebody down here actually put, for what it's worth, I tried putting this on Metabunk, but it didn't make it through the administrator. I was actually shocked, as I figured they'd have something on this. So Metabunk likes to debunk anything having to do with any kind of person talking about weather manipulation, chemtrail phenomena, any of that stuff. They've been on our videos before. They love it.
Even though it's been a pursuit of the military for decades and decades, for
Even
sure.
though it's on record.
A major stay during the Vietnam War.
Oh, big time. It's ridiculous. Okay, it's on record. Come on. So he's talking about this HARP transmitter off this tiny island off the coast of Baja. And I decided to actually go find this island and look for what he's talking about. So I'm going to zoom way out here first. Okay, so this is to show you. This is the island he's talking about, this little island right here, off the coast of here. I've got this place marked. So we're going to zoom right in. All right. So first of all, there's one main road, as you can see right here, that goes across this entire small island. And there's an old airfield with one airstrip. And so I just came down on this island. I came down to the bottom, and I just followed this road and tried to see what I could find. Right about here is when I noticed something. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in a little further. There are these grids here laid out. Can you see that? With lines going through them. And right here you've got three of these little postage stamps with grids. They sure do look like arrays to me. I don't know what you guys think, because they're definitely not farming anything right there. So there's 3 of them, here, here, and here. You see that? And then as you go down here a little bit farther to the old airstrip here, see the old airstrip, there's 3 more. Here, here, and here. Now, what's important to note about this is, if you can see the date up here in the corner, this is from May 12th, 2013. If I go all the way back to 2005, there's nothing here, okay? If I move forward, 2006, nothing here. 2007, nothing here. And The next time they took picture, 2013, bam, you have these here, here, and here. These were also put in sometime in that time frame, because going back, again, here's this same area, 2005, there's nothing, 2006, nothing, 2007, still nothing, 2013, and suddenly you have them. So when that guy says there's a transmitter here, I'm pretty sure this is what he's talking about. Unless you can tell me what these postage stamp grids are. I mean, they look like every radar array I've seen pictures of.
It's incredible. If you watch the guy's video, he gives a great explanation. But what's really unfortunate is Ken Caldera and the other leading geoengineers have admitted openly in their AAAS presentations for government science and everything else at the Council on Foreign Relations that the geoengineering that's being proposed and is de facto going on can cause droughts. And while you would hope they'd want to make it rain for the benefit of everyone, unfortunately it's a society where no good crisis goes to waste, and they really know how to make money off of broken eggs, broken farms, and we may be seeing right now what an intentional byproduct drought is from the real weather modification that's going on.
Because I think we can all agree that whatever is going on, it is not the official story we're being sold. It never is. And something is just wrong, and a lot of you can feel that. Something is wrong. And it's not just the weather in California, it's the weather, period.
And unfortunately, there's nothing that would stop anyone from being able to engineer. There's no rules on it right now. Any rogue player can do it, as we've been told over and over again.
So when this guy does a 6-part video showing how these things are broken up and what's going on with this, and talks about transmitters on this small island, and then you have people arguing there's nothing on the island. There's definitely something on this island. I don't know what that is. I can't explain what that is, but it was obviously put there not that long ago, and it definitely looks like some kind of array. So you tell me, but don't you think it's a little bit strange that there's all these clouds constantly forming off the coast of California, and none of them have any water?
You got to watch his recapping of the radar. It's mind-blowing. It'll make you think of it in a whole new way.
Okay, now this is really amazing. This is proof of the HAARP downburst killing this hurricane. This is Hurricane Norbert, and this is the HAARP transmitter, and this is Baja California here. And if we look at the vertical velocity map, we can see at 5,000 feet, what do we see? The oddest thing in the whole world. This is the proof. Here's Hurricane Norbert being split. Here is 15,000 feet. Wow. This is proof of the HAARP downburst. Red is rising air, falling air, right down the middle of a hurricane. How in the hell does that happen? 30,000 feet. Rising air, descending air right in the middle of this thing. This is the core of the hurricane right here. And this descending dry air from the HAARP transmitter right up here explains why the water vapor map is showing this dark zone right here. This is the dry air being pressed down by the HAARP transmitter right in the core of this hurricane. So by Sunday, September 7th, this hurricane will be pretty much blown apart because, you know, it's so close to the HAARP transmitter now. They're going to hit this full power all night long.
I want to bring my guest, Mr. Michael J. Murphy, on, the producer and director of What and Why in the World Are They Spraying? Two very informative documentaries about geoengineering and weather manipulation. I want to pick his brain tonight, ladies and gentlemen, not only about the stuff that Mike and I have gone over in the past, but there's a few other things like, are they melting the global ice caps, or have they done it in the past on purpose? I actually kind of mentioned this a little bit in the first segment, but I want to pick Mike's brain on it. Anyway, without further ado, I want to bring him back to the airwaves, ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Mr. Michael J. Murphy. Mike, welcome back, brother.
Thanks for having me on. As always, thank you for covering this issue, which now is starting to get more interest, at least in the public eye. So we're making progress. A lot of exciting things going on. God, it's probably been almost a year and a half since I've been on. So glad to be back. I'll cut through the chase. Glad to be back. Thanks.
It's glad to have you back, and it's always an honor to have you on. Let's hop right into the fracas first. First thing I want to ask you, because we discussed this multiple times that you've been on, and you brought this up in the second film, and I mentioned this. They can spray, not only can they seed clouds, but they can also spray desiccant into the air, which for people that don't understand what that is, it would like dry the air out. And it would keep the it would actually, in many cases, it would keep the water vapor floating up in the atmosphere rather than raining down upon the earth as rain, which would then feed the earth and grow crops. And that's what I was talking about. They'll bet on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that crops will fail or, whatever, and then they make tons of money off it. It's not even about feeding the hungry people or the poor people. It's about these scumbags making money and then manipulating the weather to do so. I mean, they're playing mad scientist in one aspect, which you don't know what kind of repercussions from playing with the weather is going to have. And then they're betting on it and making money. I mean, so yes, it does exist. So thinking in that aspect and talking about that, the river of water vapor, you've talked about this before with me. Do you think they're still doing that? Is that part of the drought problem in California currently that's going on right now?
Is that part of the drought problem? That is, I believe, 100% of the drought problem. And if you look at the jet stream right now, we have what's called a polar vortex. And meteorologists are just scratching their head going, we've never seen anything like this. And what it's doing, it's creating high pressure off of California. So typically when the jet stream comes in, it should deposit moisture in Northern California and above. And that's the wet season, very good growing. So typically they get a lot of moisture in that area because there's been an artificial, and I can get into the mechanics if you'd like, and how they create that high. What it's doing is diverting the jet stream. So it's going up into the Arctic region. Couple of reasons. Drought is very, very profitable. And if we look at it just from the drought standpoint in terms of California, what it appears, we've heard what you said, the scumbag elites, they stated that water was one of the resources that they're going to go after. And of course, when there's an abundance of water and when there's natural water, there's no reason for the government to come in. However, during a shortage, through public-private partnerships, Agenda 21, they go in and they take that water. I've been looking at one company in particular, Bechtel. Bechtel owns about 82% of the world's privatized water. They're also a major military industrial complex corporation. So they're involved in a lot of nefarious activities, and it appears that they're a major part in terms of involvement with these programs. But getting back to the drought, another reason why I believe that California is being droughted out. If you go back about 5 years ago, the Central Valley of California produced about 50% of the United States fruits and vegetables. And this was 5 or 6 years ago. Through Agenda 21 and through the Endangered Species Act, they literally cut off the water to the Central Valley, sourcing that the Delta smelt was going to become extinct. So through this, I would say it's phony environmentalism, they were able to cut off some of the canals that go into that area. And of course, it dried up a lot of farms. Many of those farmers went out of business. The ones that were able to get water or some water, now everything's drying up. What does that do? Well, it dries up 50% of the fruits and vegetables in that region, dries up food prices. But what it does, if you look at it from the standpoint of global government, it makes the U.S. interdependent with other countries. So now we are interdependent. We're getting avocados from Chile. We're getting things from Mexico. We're importing all of these fruits and vegetables. And because of that interdependence, what does that do? Well, you get a UN or some other global body that says, wow, U.S. is getting fruits and vegetables and trading around the world. We have to create global governance. So I believe that's another reason for that. But if you look at the article that I just wrote, and this was, I would say, one of my very important article because it's the direction that we're going. It's called Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic. And I want to get in, before I get into why I believe the jet stream is being diverted, into that area, I think it'd be probably a good idea to go into this article, and then we'll get into what my theory is in terms of why the jet stream is up there. But Popeye, there's no question that the jet stream is being diverted into that area, and what's happening? It's going up into the Arctic, bringing all of this warm moisture into the Arctic, and now I'm in the Midwest, and I've been here for about 10 months. I was in California, in Maui, Hawaii, very warm climates. Now I'm here in the Arctic, cold Chicago, with about 17 or 18 inches of snow on the ground. It's a unique experience, but it's very cold. And one of the reasons for that, and it was a very cold summer, I did grow up here as a child, but the jet stream is diverting. It's going into the Arctic, and then, of course, its natural rebound brings it back into the Midwest. So we're getting all of this moisture, and we're getting very cold temperatures. Again, a very cold summer and very cold past, I believe, 18 months from what I'm hearing. So a couple of reasons for that. But would you like me to get into the article, Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic?
Yeah, and if you want, you could also get into the mechanics of how they're keeping the water vapor and everything up there. You can get as detailed as you want. I'll tell you how long we got before break. We have about 11 and a half minutes, so you can have the floor until we go to break if you need to. So whatever you want to pick up first, the mechanics, or if you want to get into the article.
You know what, probably the mechanics, because I think that will give the audience just a good idea of how the aerosols react. If we go back to geoengineering programs, if we look what we're finding and what we covered and why in the world are they spraying was massive amounts of aluminum, barium, and strontium. These are considered the chemtrail geoengineering footprint. So scientists started taking rain samples, and I'm really cutting through the chase. There are a lot of details here that I could get involved with, but I think it's important to move on. And I think your audience is pretty well versed on this. We've been on several times, and I think they're more awake than most audiences. But anyways, this chemtrail geoengineering footprint, what we found the most of was aluminum. And when I wrote my first article, which was What in the World Are They Spraying?, it actually led to the first film. I uncovered aluminum being found in rainwater tests, and of course, that article came out of me being at the American Association for the Advancement of Science meeting. That was a geoengineering conference. And geoengineers for a long time have been talking about spraying sulfur into the sky, and the idea was to mimic volcanoes, right? So volcanoes spew up sulfur and many other things. And what they noticed when there were huge eruptions throughout history, it would cool the planet because the sun would be blocked out. So here are geoengineers at the meeting. They're talking about putting aluminum oxide for the first time. Ding, ding, light went off, or light went on in many of our heads, and we said, wow, that's what we're finding in the rainwater tests. There's the link to geoengineering. So geoengineers state aluminum would be a very effective metal and very toxic to human health in both ecosystems. That's why we're seeing ecosystem collapses and aluminum-related illnesses. These are nanoparticles that they're spraying. So when they put them up there, they say, oh, maybe a couple of years, but they absolutely come down into the air that we breathe. They pass right past the blood-brain barrier because they're nanoparticles, about 1/10 of a micron, if not smaller. So they're very small, and that makes them even more toxic, but we can get into that more. But aluminum, so they say aluminum, again, is lightweight and it's very reflective, so it would be a very effective particle to put into our sky. What we found, it's also a very effective conductor. So what they have the ability to do, and we'll get into the desiccants. You can spray barium. Barium has a couple of different applications. Barium is a desiccant, so you can actually kill a storm and utilize other technologies. You can also spray black soot, something that has been admitted. It's a form of geoengineering to build clouds, or as you said, to be used as a desiccant to destroy clouds. So there are a number of different things and different technologies, and you can even, with the HARP system, you can take a storm and you can change the ionization, and the storm will fall apart immediately. So Scott Stevens spoke about that. He was a 20-year award-winning weatherman, and he came on and he was very well aware of the chemtrails issue and how geoengineering relates to our changing weather. Of course, everybody's aware that our weather is dramatically changing. So getting back to this, so a storm front can be built depending on what you put in to a storm, certain particles will actually act as what's called cloud condensation nuclei. So the idea is putting these particles into the sky, and typically when we have moisture that builds, moisture will evaporate, let's say over the ocean. Eventually it will rise and combine on other water molecules, and eventually when it gets heavy enough, it'll fall as rain. These particles, they can put certain particles up there so the moisture will hold on for a longer time, thus building a storm. So again, you can create a river, sort of, the idea is to create a stream of moisture and direct it just as you would a river, depending on what you spray into it. But what's very interesting to me was the idea of aluminum oxide, okay, and the fact that it's a conductor in our sky. And what we noticed, about 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours ahead of a big storm system, those were the days when they trailed the most, back and forth, literally blocking out the sun. Those are the days when people had burning eyes, irritability, nausea, headache, complaining of a lot of respiratory issues. Barium's very high on those days. I spoke with some emergency room physicians who said, our ERs are packed during heavy spray days, people coming in with heart attacks. Barium increases our blood pressure, so that's one of the symptoms. But, I think many people can tell when they have the burning eyes and very irritable during those days. But anyways, what they do is they create this big blanket of metal particulate in the sky, and through the HARP system or other technology, they, again, heat that metal up in the sky. And when you heat part of the sky up, what does it do? It raises up. And when it raises, it literally creates a low-pressure vacuum. So sky goes up, it sucks storms right into certain regions, or, in the case of California, out of certain regions. So it's a very effective and very basic technology in terms of how you can control weather in certain areas. So it's very concerning to us, though, because it's very destructive. And, of course, when you divert a jet stream in one area, there's going to be an offset in another area. And back in the 70s, scientists were talking about this, and they were talking about the species extinction rate possibly going through the roof because, again, certain insects, certain aquatic bugs, and even certain animals need a natural rain pattern. And when that's diverted, you're going to have all kinds of offsets. And that's absolutely what we're seeing right now. I'm not sure what the extinction rate is, but it's literally through the roof, and I can get that number for you next time. So, Popeye, just based on that, it's a big concern. But we looked into, of course, you spoke about people making money on this. So when we produced Why in the World Are They Spraying, we looked at various reasons for weather control. And I think like most people, when I first heard about it, I said, why would anybody want to control the weather? It doesn't make sense. And that was what kind of, that was when the light went on, because I started asking questions. And I started getting answers, which really concerned me. And at the very least, like you said, people can make money on it. And the idea is, we went to Chicago and we interviewed a trader, and we spoke about weather derivatives. And my jaw dropped, because literally weather is being traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I was like, weather is traded? Are you kidding me? And he said, yeah, they're traded in the form of derivatives. And it actually started back in the 90s, the early 90s. Our favorite company, Enron. Anyways, Enron traded our first weather derivative. And what a company will do, Michael Agnew, did just a great job at explaining to us, a company will offset the risk due to weather. So he explained, like, let's say if you're a heating company and you need X number of days to be below 30 degrees in the wintertime, and it's a particularly warm winter like they're having. Well, a company has the ability to offset the risk by purchasing these weather derivatives. Another example he used was a giant seed company, and the idea was, let's say if you have $10 million worth of seed that you planted, but you insure it for $20 million and your crop fails, he said you can literally double your money. And that's what really started making sense. And I'm not saying every trader who trades weather derivatives is part of a weather controller supporting this. However, we are aware of insider trading, and the fact of the matter is there are some people who literally know what the long-term game plan is in terms of weather, and if you have the playbook, you can't fail. You literally have the ability to make millions, if not billions of dollars, just on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and that's playing with weather derivatives. So there are a lot of different motives, and I would say that's probably the lowest in terms of effective ways to consolidate an enormous amount of both money and power. The other thing that most people, I think, are kind of aware of is owning the weather by 2025, and that's a stated goal by our military. And the idea is essentially controlling the weather to give militaries a battlefield advantage. So the idea is, if you can create sandstorms in Iraq so that, during an Iraqi invasion so that the enemy can't get off of the ground, then you can literally have a battlefield advantage. And I remember, Popeye, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, somebody at church said, "Oh my God, Iraq is getting slammed with these sandstorms. Wow, God is really on the side of the U.S." And that was before I was aware of the weather technologies and the ability to literally manipulate weather in such a manner. But now looking back on it, there's no question in my mind that was absolutely used. Getting more into the military technologies. Let's say if you're a military and you want to wage war against the country. However, it's not the public would not be so supportive of that. It's a very effective tool for war. And the idea is you can literally drought out a country. You can destabilize nations without firing a shot. We've been covering geoengineering for such a long time and looking at the way that our weather, without question, is being manipulated. Some of the effects and some of the ways to consolidate an enormous amount of power. Of course, we got into military a little bit before, and we got into the derivative claim, but it also relates to genetically modified crops. And the idea is if you create a drought in a certain area, crops won't grow. You can actually, there's a new seed. It's an abiotic, stress-resistant, genetically modified seed, which will grow in this new environment that's created by geoengineering. So abiotic stress is anything that stresses the soil. It's heavy metal contamination. It's too much moisture, fungal overgrowth, because our sun is blocked out now. The earth is receiving 20% less sunlight. We have fungal overgrowth and a lot of illness for that. And there's a new Monsanto designed genetically modified seed that will grow in this new environment. So it's literally a hostile takeover of our entire food supply. And I live on an organic farm in Maui part of the year, and we've lost about 50% of our ability to get our crops. And another farmer that we know, and this is kind of standard around the island, 70% crop loss in the past 10 years. So there's an enormous crop loss. With that being said, the GMO seeds very much of Kissinger said if you control the oil, you can control nations. If you control the food, you can control the people. And we are all aware that that is a major part of the agenda here. So that's just a huge part of this. So it's also geoengineering is a means to form global governance. And the idea here, and the way that geoengineers are now selling this, and they've been having a lot of meetings talking about this, is, well, because geoengineering gives man godlike power, and that's a quote from geoengineer David Keith, he said there would be wars over whose hand should be on the thermostat. And because of this, we will have to develop global governance. And they are moving very quickly in developing the framework. There's no question about this. The framework to form a global government body to, quote unquote, monitor these programs. And what's even more scary, Popeye, listening to the geoengineers talking about the fact, and there's no question that geoengineering will create droughts and floods in other areas. These are not my words. These are the words of geoengineers. What they're saying, because it offsets weather patterns, we're also going to have to use these programs to control the weather and determine what countries get rain, what countries don't. And what was interesting, when I listened to geoengineers talk a little more, they were talking about offering incentives for countries to sign on to these geoengineering treaties. And they didn't talk about what incentives they were, but my guess is they were probably who would get rain. And of course, a country that doesn't sign on to this would get droughted out, just like we're seeing in Africa. You had mentioned Iran and a number of other things. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Defense Secretary Cohen had mentioned, and I believe he was with Ronald Reagan, or this was back in, I think 82 or 89, mentioned the fact that there's a new type of eco-terrorism, and that they have the ability to create floods in certain areas, change our weather, and even create earthquakes. So there's no question this technology exists. It's just not being promoted on your Fox News or your NBC News and everything else. And if people really, I think, understood the gravity of this issue and how damaging these programs were, I think we would have a revolution tomorrow.
Dodge this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Popeye from Down the Rabbit Hole, PopeyeRadio.com, and FederalJack.com. Putting this video together really quick just to show you something. I want to bring up a very important topic. The drought that's going on in California, this ongoing drought that's been going on in California since 2011. And I am going to show you in the following video how that drought is being manipulated on purpose through geoengineering, through weather modification. Now, there are multiple reasons and outcomes for doing things like this. There's never just one reason, and I will go over the multiple reasons during the video, and I will show you pieces of evidence from myself and other researchers backing up my synopsis. So first, let's get into the drought that California is going through. Now, I'm sure you have all heard the latest news. It's March 15th, 2015 currently, and I'm sure you've all heard the latest news that a NASA scientist came out recently the other day in Newsweek and said that there is not enough water in California to last more than a year, and there's going to be strict rationing. And a lot of people could initially say, oh, well, this is just people fear-mongering, but this is actually being picked up by the mainstream media, and this has been an ongoing problem and been something that's been warned about for a while because of this drought. And one of the major problems is the people on the ground, the politicians, the people in charge, the bureaucrats, they have not prepared for such an event. They have not prepared their people. They have not prepared the citizens. You don't have enough rain to replenish the reservoirs and the rivers and everything else, well, you're going to have a drought. Now, I know they get some of the water from Southern California, gets some of the water from the Colorado River, but that still doesn't help the center part of the state, nor does it help the northern part of the state. And even the Colorado River is only good for a certain percentage of water. You still need the other water from the northern half to flow down through the state. So let's get into the evidence to support my hypothesis, and not just mine but others, that the drought in California is being done on purpose via weather modification, otherwise known as geoengineering, which is very real. And you can go look up, they've actually had conferences where these people, these scientists, these geoengineers actually admit that they are actually doing what we are saying that they're doing. This is not just some mythical thing that we're making up. We're not just conspiracy theorists. You're conspiracharge! First, I'm going to play a clip from CBS News, which anybody with half a brain knows should be called the CIA. Literally, CBS crawling with CIA, but that's a complete another separate side issue of California for such an event, and they have not urged the people of California to prepare for such an event over the past couple of years. And it doesn't matter if they start preparing tomorrow, there will be more problems than there would have been if they had started to prepare last year or the year before. So they're going to have to come up with some more solutions, and they're going to have to do so much faster. Now, there's plenty of things you can get into, like the huge desalination plant that they're building over there, which I've been saying for years that they should be building desalination plants all over the world instead of spending money on bombs, rockets, and missiles that chase people down corridors and around hallways. And instead of building laser weapons and more stuff to kill people with, perhaps the money should be spent by these governments around the world to build desalination plants all along the coasts. Even if you had to put them inland to protect them from tsunamis or earthquakes, you could still build these plants and provide clear, fresh drinking water to many people around the world that actually need it, and that would solve many problems. Anyway, getting back to the drought in California. Now, they are, by the way, building this huge desalination plant out in Cali currently, and hopefully that will help alleviate some of the problem, but still, the major portion of the problem is it has not rained. They have not had a lot of rain. Anyway, I'm going to play a clip from CBS News that they recently released about 2 weeks ago. They came out with, and it's titled right on their website, which I should take a screenshot of, "Ridiculously Resilient Ridge Responsible for California Drought." So they're blaming this ridiculously resilient, as these scientists are saying, high pressure ridge that's blocking moisture from coming in. Where have I seen that before? Oh, that's right. It's happened before in history where a high pressure ridge stopped moisture from coming in and caused a drought in California. And back then it was surmised that it was done by man. People blamed the Russians, but think if it was done by the Russians and the current psychos in power figured that out, and they figured out how to manipulate the weather the same way the Russians did. And that now they're doing with our own current weather weaponry. Remember, there's actually a UN treaty that goes back to the 70s that states that they can't use weather weapons on each other, but they can use weather weapons inside their own countries, on their own people. They're allowed to test them and use them. So who's to say that they're not purposely causing this